As pastor of Covenant Church in Winterville and Washington, I've been preparing a statement over the last few days to respond to these recent acts of racism in our country. And with the death of George Floyd, I believe it's even more important for me to speak out at this time on behalf of our church. It should go without saying, but let me say it clearly anyway, that we as Christian people do not condone the mistreatment of people because of the color of their skin or their ethnicity. You know, what took place in Georgia and Kentucky and in more recent days in Minnesota by law enforcement personnel, no less, is something that all of us should deplore. I mean, I'm ashamed that that kind of thing can take place in our country, and I hope the perpetrators of these acts will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. I serve, as many of you know, as the pastor to many people who are African American. And all I could think of is that it would be terrible for something like has happened to these people to happen to some of my friends, my dear brothers and sisters in Christ at Covenant Church or in this community. At the same time, as a white pastor of a church of what is a majority of white people, I'm sure that I really have no idea the pain involved in the African American community because of these unjust acts. I mean, all I know to do is to apologize for the actions of a few people that do not represent my heart. And I don't believe they represent the heart of Jesus Christ. And I would pledge to be a person who is going to love people as Jesus commanded his disciples. You know, I've listened to a lot of historical material this year on World War II, and I find myself, every time surprised that a few people, and then even governments and nations, but a few people could proclaim that a particular people was of lesser value than other people, and then, they unleashed upon the Jewish nation the kind of horrific things that eventually became known as the Holocaust. And it didn't start out as mass murder. It started with a few people who decided that the Jewish race deserved to be treated differently than other people. And then it grew as people said nothing. So I just find myself being ashamed that the church was so silent during that time in history. And so the more I thought about those events, the more I don't want us to be unwilling to speak out or to be a generation that is silent when we do have the opportunity at this time. The ancestry of most of the black people in our country includes slavery and segregation and discrimination. And I wish that I could say that we were beyond the discrimination. But it is obvious that that continues in the hearts of some people and has manifested itself in hateful ways like we've all experienced recently. So let me just call those acts what they are. They're evil. And as Christian people, we will not stand for evil. Well, my prayer is that we will examine our hearts and that we will pray and that we will act in ways so that injustice and discrimination will end in this generation. And I pray that would be your prayer too. So, what are some practical things that we could do? Well, as the pastor of our church, I have written the pastors of Koinonia and Community Christian Church and Reimage to express my concern and my love for them and their congregations, and to apologize to them for people who certainly do not represent the way we believe or feel about African American people. I think more than anything, I want our churches and our pastors to be unified. Second, I believe that it would go a long way with our African American brothers and sisters if we spoke similar words of reassurance to them as the opportunities present themselves. Something like, we apologize for the actions of a few people, and we do not agree with it whatsoever. We also pledge our love and our support during this difficult time. And we don't want this kind of thing to ever happen again. Third, we can pray. So tomorrow, June the 3rd, I am calling for a day of prayer and fasting for all of Covenant Church so that we can pray for our country and for our community. And so I'll be leading a live prayer event at noon tomorrow here in our worship center. And we will not be able to open the worship center for people, for a large crowd. So I would encourage you instead that you would join us for this event online, and you can get there by Facebook Live or by going to our website, which is covenant.cc. And we'll have an opportunity to cry out to God for healing in our nation and healing of the brokenness of racial relations in our country, that we might be unified and that God might heal our land. Finally, I think we all need to forgive. Instead of repaying evil with evil, as a lot of people seem to want to be doing these days, I think we need to love those who offend us. Personally, I am offended at people who want to stir up evil, but I will choose to forgive instead. I look forward to joining with many of you tomorrow as we cry out together. I do believe that God will hear our prayers.